Hi, I'm Adam Porter and this is my board gaming vlog, and this is my top 100 board games and card games and dice games, tabletop games. I will say this is not a top 100 games that you should go out and buy. This is top 100 games for Adam in Wales. Okay, this is very specific to me, it's a very personal list. I weighed up, how am I going to do this? Am I going to put down the top 100 games that I think are the best designed? I mean, I really care about that stuff. What's a good design? What's a clever design? What's streamlined? What's marketable? Or am I going to talk about what are the top 100 games that I enjoy playing? And if I do that, do I mean what games I would like to play right now, this minute? Which games would be the ones that I would want to play the most? Or do I think about the last 10 years or 20 years? Which ones have I enjoyed the most? And what I settled on was games which have an emotional connection to me, okay? Games where I look at them and they fill me with joy or memories. And that means that there are some games that are going to creep onto this list that aren't going to work for you at all. There are going to be some games on this list that are objectively poor games, but I've had a fantastic time with them in the past, maybe as a child, but there are games here which just mean something to me, okay? So that's the basic frame for my top 100 games, and it made it much easier to make the list, because it's entirely subjective, right? And this list is not going to be a list that everybody's going to go out and go, right, I need those 100 games. But hopefully it will give you some ideas, and I do tend to have fairly obscure games in my collection, so hopefully a few of those will creep onto the list as well, and you'll get to know about something you hadn't heard about before. Because it's about emotional connection, obviously my own games would be right at the top of the list, so I've had to take them off. So games that I've designed, games like Quazzle and Zooligans. I love Zooligans. Zooligans is brand new out. I really love it. Compromat, love this one as well. This is new out, okay, from Helvetique. So these games, Pikoko and Doodle Rush and Big Bazaar and Throne behind me here, I love all these games, but they're not going to make it onto the top 100. Although I'm sure I'll keep bringing them up because I love talking about them. So let's get started. We're going to go from number 100 to number 91 today, and then what we're going to do as well is keep track of which publishers, which designers, which themes, and which mechanisms I particularly enjoy. So we're going to be counting those up, and at the end of each 10 I'm going to be showing you who's pulling ahead, you know, and try and keep a little bit of competition between the publishers and the designers there, and see which are the designers and publishers which I love the most. So starting at number 100 we have Ice Cool from Brain Games. So the first time that I ever came across Brain Games was in 2012 at Essen Spiel. I was looking out for publishers that produced games that I wouldn't be able to get in the UK, and I came across this really friendly bunch of Latvian game designers and publishers at Brain Games stand. They were really sort of enthusiastically pushing these 4 little card games. I think they were called Food Chain and Construction Site and Central Market and Air King. And I really enjoyed talking to these guys, and so I picked up all 4 of those games. I don't even know if I've got them anymore. I played them a fair amount right at the start. They weren't world-changing games or anything like that, but immediately Brain Games was on my radar. I then saw them at UK Games Expo. I picked up their game Om Nom Nom, which I really, really love. Om Nom Nom is it's not on my top 100, so let's not talk about it today, but you could, if you've got kids and you want a simple game to play, Om Nom Nom's a good one. And so I started pitching my own games to them. So I pitched them Pikoko, the early version of Pikoko, which they went on to publish, and also Doodle Rush they went on to publish. And so I've got to know these guys quite well. And after I got those games signed, but before my games came out, Ice Cool hit the market. And Ice Cool was a massive hit. It won the Kinderspiel des Jahres, the Children's Game of the Year award in Germany, which was a huge deal for Brain Games. The designer of Ice Cool is Brian Gomez, which is just a pseudonym for Brain Games. Okay, so this game is designed by Janis Grunter and Egils Grasmanis and Edgar Zakis and probably others in the team that I'm not so familiar with. But I know these guys, and I can see the love and attention that they pour into this game, and they've continued to support it with Ice Cool 2 and the upcoming Iron Forest. Iron Forest is coming up this year as a Kickstarter, and it has a second level, so you've got a second board that sits on pillars above your original Ice Cool board, and your playing pieces that you're flicking around are little mechs, and they can drop through holes into the board to the lower level, and you've got this little device where you can sort of spring them up, like shoot them up through a little cannon that will pop them up onto the top board and land somewhere, but with the same sort of similar gameplay to Ice Cool. It looks really, really cool. So Ice Cool is a great flicking game. What I particularly love about it is that you can put spin on these pieces. You can put top spin on them. You can do clever trick shots where you can jump them over walls when you get really good at it. And essentially you're just trying to chase the other playing pieces and bump into them, or trying to get through those doorways and gather different coloured fish as you go. Simple game, good for kids, good for families. You're probably not going to stand around and play it as a bunch of adults, but do you know what? I do. so maybe I'm misspeaking there. So anyway, that's my number 100, Ice Cool from Brain Games. Number 99 on the list is Silver and Gold. This is from NSV and Phil Walker Harding. And this game, I mean, Phil Walker Harding was the selling point. Anything which has Phil Walker Harding's name on, I'm instantly having a look. I'm probably buying. And this one I came across in a little German board game store. I'd never heard of the game. It had only just come out, and it certainly wasn't something that anyone was aware of in the UK at the time. When I bought it without really knowing what it was, but when I got it home, it's a roll and write game. Okay, so I mean, there's no rolling in this. We're not rolling dice, but a roll and write game is usually where you roll dice and then you write stuff down. Here, we're turning over cards and then we're writing stuff down. And it's got a little bit of that sort of Tetris style shapes that we're putting onto our cards here, but we're actually writing onto the specific playing cards with a dry white marker, which is totally unique. I've not seen another game where you do that. And simple as are all Phil Walker Harding games, it's so approachable, and easy to get into. You've got to be careful if you don't like damaging your components, because here you're going to end up with a bunch of marks on your card. So if you don't like that, if that turns you off, then don't buy this game. But it's a cheap game. You can always buy a second copy. It's lovely and portable, simple to play. Highly recommended, Silver and Gold. Number 98 on my list is Hana Mikoji, which is a two-player card game where we're battling to sort of take control of these central cards, which here are geishas. And so if you think of a game like, you may know the games Lost Cities or Battle Line, Shotten Totten, these sort of games where you're just facing off against one opponent, trying to control a central layout of cards. Actually, this is something that you do in my new game Compromat. Compromat is inspired by games like Hana Mikoji and Lost Cities, Battle Line. But Hana Mikoji is a really good one. It's got beautiful artwork. It sort of came from nowhere and suddenly everybody was talking about it a few years ago. It's got that I split, you choose mechanism where I'll lay out some cards, and the first thing is my opponent gets to take some of them and then I'm going to get the rest. It's got all that sort of stuff going on in the game. It's a relatively simple game, quite short, but just really clever mechanisms. You look at it and just think it's such a clever design. Number 97 is Happy Salmon. And Happy Salmon is one of those games that when I talk about having an emotional connection, Happy Salmon was a big feature at my recent wedding. I got married in Germany, and a lot of my in-laws can't speak English, so there were a lot of the German family there. My wife is German, and so a lot of her family weren't able to talk to my family. They could manage a little bit with Google Translate and things like this, but the thing that really brought them together was playing Happy Salmon. I had 2 copies of Happy Salmon. When you put it together, you can play with up to 12 people. And essentially, you get them all around a table and they're all giving each other high fives. One player's got a card which says high five, so they've got to give another player a high five, and then they draw the next card and it says fist bump, and so it says pound it, which means fist bump. And so then you're looking for somebody else who's got a pound it card and you're giving them a fist bump, and then it says Happy Salmon, and you're slapping each other's wrists, and then you're doing switcheroo, and you're running around the table. The whole game takes about 2 minutes to play. It's frantic, it's loud, and as I say, with 2 sets you can play up to 12 people. It's really good for kids, but it's fun for adults as well. We were laughing so much, and these are 2 families that just couldn't talk to each other, but they could play Happy Salmon together and have a whale of a time. It was great. It was really, really nice to see, and it went on for ages. They just kept playing again and again and again during the reception. So Happy Salmon was a huge hit. Happy Salmon was actually the inspiration for my game Doodle Rush, this one here. So this was my thinking was what would Happy Salmon be if it was a drawing game? And so I tried to come up with a game that was just as snappy, just as fast, just as loud, just as chaotic as a drawing game. And I didn't quite manage to get it down to the 2 minutes or 90 seconds of Happy Salmon. But this game takes 6 minutes to play, just as frantic, just as quick, just as funny. So that's Happy Salmon. Number 96 on the list is Goblet. So Goblet is a game by Blue Orange Games, and in fact it was the first game by Blue Orange Games. So I believe Thierry Denoual, who is the owner or he's in charge in Blue Orange. So he created the game Goblet. I believe he constructed the original sets and was selling them, you know, sort of, I suppose at that point you would think of that as self-publishing, wouldn't we? But then that company has grown into something really quite large and substantial and important. They make beautiful quality products. Essentially it's tic-tac-toe. It's you know, trying to create 4 in a row, but when you're placing pieces, you either place them onto the board or you move one of your existing pieces, and a larger piece can cover another piece, one of your opponent's pieces. And so sometimes when you're moving a piece, you might have forgotten that underneath one of your opponent's pieces is there, but once you lift it off, you can't put it back. So there's a memory element to it. So it's like crossing Connect 4 tic-tac-toe with a memory aspect, and it's really satisfying. It's just a really neat little system. So number 95 on the list is Dream Home from Rebel. This is a card drafting game, and what I mean by that is at the start of each round you lay out a series of cards, and then each player in turn will select 2 cards from that row. Well, one player only gets 1 card. They get 1 card and the start player token. And it's really important that you get that start player token from time to time because you want to be the first to pick. But the great thing in a game like Dream Home and in card drafting games in general is that everybody gets something. No one's left behind. Okay, it's just a case of what do I take and when, and how do I deprive my opponents of the stuff that they really want? And in Dream Home there's also a positional aspect to it. Do I put the stuff on the first floor, the top floor, the ground floor, in the basement? And it's a really accessible theme. It's meaningful to everybody, setting up your house. This is a really simple one. Again, it's good for children and families, but there's enough going on here that you could play this with gamers and still have a relatively good time, especially if you've got the expansion in there, Sunny Street. That's a really nice expansion and just adds a little bit of extra decisions to the game. So number 94 is Captain Carcass, which is also known as Dead Man's Draw. This is a push your luck game, so that's a game where you're turning over a card and then you're deciding, do I keep turning over more? Do I keep turning over more? At what point do I stop? Because at some point you're going to go bust, and you go bust when you get 2 identical cards coming out in the sequence. Once that second card comes out, then you lose everything. But the great thing in Dead Man's Draw or Captain Carcass is that every card has a special ability on it, and lots of these are take that type ability, so stealing off the other players, or gaining extra stuff for yourself, or extra special abilities, and so on. And it's chaotic, but it's really, really fun. I think it started out as an app, and then it was turned into a card game. I was given the card game, I won it as a prize in a raffle at Christmas at a gaming event, and I'd never heard of it. Played it, really, really enjoyed it. I didn't have high expectations, but then I became aware of this Captain Carcass edition with this lovely cute artwork from Bombix. I love Bombix artwork, and so we've got this diver's face in a sort of transparent diver's helmet on the tin. It just looked great, but you couldn't get it anywhere because it wasn't distributed in the UK. And so this became a bit of a grail game for me at that point. I really, really wanted this edition because I loved the game, but I wanted that fancy looking version. And eventually I was on holiday in Stockholm, staying with some friends, and I was in a board game store and I saw it there. And so I bought it. It cost me a fortune because everything's expensive in Stockholm. but I bought it and I was really pleased, So that's now the version that I use and I have as Captain Carcass. Number 93 is Cube Quest. So Cube Quest is another flicking game, and again we're flicking unusual pieces. What we're flicking here is dice, essentially cubes, and you're trying to knock your opponent's king off the board, but every cube has a different ability. So you've got all sorts of different types of soldiers with different sort of twists to how they work. At the start of the game you build up your army. It's really simple, there's not that many different units, but you build up your army in secret so your opponent doesn't know what you're going to have, and then you set up on your side of the board with the opponent not looking, so they don't know know what you're building, and you can build little sort of walls and you know, these blocks, they sort of stack up, or you can spread them out. You can do what you like to protect your king, and then you're flicking, trying to knock pieces off. They're flying all over the room. I mean, it's just silly, but with all those special powers and abilities, it's just really fun and interesting. The production's great. I think in the original edition, these sort of mouse mat boards that were provided were folded in the box, and a lot of them had these sort of creases, essentially, after sitting on store shelves for several months, that meant they weren't usable. And so Gamewright, the publisher, went to great lengths to replace all of those. So they sent out new boards to people. Sometimes they sent out whole new games to people. It must have cost them a fortune. And sadly, we've never seen any more of Cube Quest. I would have loved to have seen expansions with new factions and new abilities. I mean, the game is ripe for it. Well, it's great as it is. If you can get hold of a copy, then I would go for it. I don't worry about the fact there's no expansions. But it would be lovely to have more different types of cubes that work in different ways, and so on and so forth. But the game is wonderful. Number 92 is the only collectible card game that I've ever played. And it's not just cards, actually. Star Wars Destiny is all about dice. Okay, so this is the only time that I've ever gone into a shop and bought a random booster pack, a random pack. Don't know what cards I'm going to get, what dice I'm going to get, but I'm just drawn into it, addicted. Can't stop myself from going and just picking up, I'm buying this game and this game, but actually I'll just take a couple of boosters for Star Wars Destiny. So I got into that for a few months. Not sure I want to get into that again with any other games, but I was drawn into it by my friend Tom, who's a huge Star Wars fan, and you know, I was skeptical, but he got me playing the starter set with him, and yes, I was hooked, because I love dice games and I'm a sucker for Star Wars. What I really like is dice games that don't rely on the Yahtzee mechanism. Don't get me wrong, I like the Yahtzee mechanism, but lots of games use that. When I see a dice game that uses a different mechanism, then I'm always intrigued. I find that really inspiring. That's what I tried to do with my game Throne, is to have a dice game that doesn't just rely on rolling your dice and then re-rolling, see what you've got. Okay, that's the Yahtzee mechanism. Star Wars Destiny, when you roll your dice, the really nice thing is that you don't immediately resolve them. So I roll them, I've got my results laid out there. Now my opponent takes a turn, and they can play cards which might manipulate my dice. They could roll their own dice. They can do various different things to change the outcome, to defend themselves against my attack. Then I resolve my dice one at a time on each individual turn. And just that delay allows such a big sort of design space, and hence we've got all these, you know, thousands of cards in the game that all do different things, because we've got that design space to do it. It's such a clever game. It's really attractive because it's got all that wonderful Fantasy Flight Star Wars artwork, but it's not just stills from the film, which I would hate. It's nicely drawn pictures. It's really thematic, but in a fun, silly way. You know, I love that I can have a Jawa and I can give him a lightsaber, and I can, you know, I like the fact that it makes sense, but I can be a little bit sort of whimsical about how I approach the Star Wars theme. I always enjoy that, you know, being able to make up a silly sort of scenario. And Star Wars Destiny allows a lot of creativity. I enjoyed the deck building aspect of it, putting together my deck and then taking that to face up against Tom's deck, which is inevitably better, and then accept my defeat graciously. Number 91 is Dice Town, and I've just been saying that I don't like games. Well, no, I didn't say I don't like games with the Yahtzee mechanism, but that I look out for games that don't have the Yahtzee mechanism. Well, Dice Town does have the Yahtzee mechanism. You're rolling, you're re-rolling, you're re-rolling again, and you're trying to get the best poker set of dice. But the brilliant thing in Dice Town is the fact that everybody's doing it simultaneously. So there's no downtime. A lot of these Yahtzee games, it would be one player rolling, re-rolling, re-rolling, then the next player goes, re-rolls, re-rolls, re-rolls. Here, everybody does it at the same time. And you can play with quite a large group of players. There's loads of take that in this game. There's loads of cards that allow me to steal from other players, and then there's this sheriff's badge that if you win the sheriff's badge, then you get to make all decisions about ties and things like that, and other players can bribe you to sort of select in their favour. It's total chaos, but there's loads of interaction, absolutely loads of interaction. Chaotic sort of negotiating and arguing over the table and playing cards on each other, and it just works really, really well. The artwork's great, and you know, the production's fantastic. It's fast, it's loud. The dice, when you're rolling them in those dice cups, they're crashing crashing in those dice cups, you know, click, 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 click as you're rolling it, and then you slam it down on the table. You feel like you're in a sort of high-stakes Wild West sort of saloon game of poker, you know, or some sort of, you know, gambling, you know, throwing those dice down with a big bang and then revealing what you've got. It's really, really good, really atmospheric game, Dice Town. So I want to keep track in these videos of which publishers are pushing ahead, which designers I particularly like, which themes I particularly enjoy, and which style of games I particularly like. So we're looking here for any publisher that has been on the list more than once. So if we look at my charts here, we can see there are no front runners with regards to the publishers as yet. They've all just been on there once each. And it's the same situation with the designers. So between 191, no designers have pushed ahead. Everybody's just got in there once in that particular list. If we go on to looking at the themes that I particularly enjoy, then we can see that there are 2 games in that first 10 games of the top 100 which feature anthropomorphic animals, so animals getting up to all sorts of mischief. So every other theme on there is unique as yet. And then finally, looking at the styles of games that I enjoy, well, what we can see is in that initial list of 10 games, we've got 2 flicking games and 2 dice games. So they're pushing out ahead. When I'm talking about themes throughout this and mechanisms throughout this list, I'm going to hone in on what I feel is the central theme. Clearly, there may be aspects, there may be dice that will feature in some games, but I wouldn't call them a dice game. So, front runners for now, flicking games, dice games, and games with anthropomorphic animals. Let's see how that changes as we move into numbers 90 to 81.